Picture this. It is 7:45 in the morning in Tokyo. A packed subway car. Dozens of children, some as young as 4, sitting beside their parents, quietly, patiently, without a single meltdown. No iPad. No promise treat at the end. No parent whispering threats through a frozen smile. Just stillness. And the children look completely comfortable in it. Now picture a school cafeteria in Ohio or London or Sydney. A parent is bargaining with a 6-year-old over whether shoes need to be worn to the table. Another is counting to 3, for the 11th time this week. And both parents will go to bed tonight feeling like they failed at something, though they cannot name exactly what. The difference between those two scenes is not genetics. It is not strictness. It is not even culture in the way most people think about it. It is a psychological system, one that Japan has been quietly running for over 1,000 years. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what it is, why it works, and the 2 core principles behind it that no parenting book in the Western world has ever clearly explained to you. Here is the first thing Western parents almost universally misunderstand about discipline. They believe it is something you apply to a child like pressure. You push, the child resists, and you push harder until the behavior changes. Psychologists call this an external locus of control model, and research from Stanford's Department of Developmental Psychology consistently shows that children raised primarily under external pressure develop compliance without conviction. They obey when someone is watching. They stop the moment no one is. Japanese parenting philosophy operates from an entirely different premise. Discipline in the Japanese tradition is not something you do to a child. It is something you build inside one. The Japanese word most closely associated with this concept is shitsuke, and while it is often translated simply as discipline, its actual meaning is far richer. Shitsuke refers to the process of stitching correct behavior into a person's character the way a tailor stitches fabric, gradually, precisely, and permanently. It is not about punishment. It is not about reward. It is about repetition with dignity. And this is where Western parenting, despite its warmth and best intentions, quietly loses the thread. Somewhere in the last 3 decades, a well-meaning shift happened in Western parenting culture. Experts, reacting against the cold authoritarian models of the 1950s, began emphasizing emotional validation, open negotiation, and child-centered reasoning. And those instincts were not wrong. Children do need to feel heard. Emotional intelligence matters deeply. But the pendulum swung so far that an entire generation of parents began confusing explanation with authority and warmth with boundaries. The result is what developmental psychologists now call the exhausted parent paradox. The more you explain, justify, and negotiate every rule, the less the child internalizes the rule as reality. Instead, they internalize it as a debate, something that has a counter-argument if they can just find the right angle. Harvard researchers studying family behavioral patterns found that children who were given lengthy explanations for every behavioral boundary showed significantly higher rates of boundary testing than children whose expectations were communicated calmly, consistently, and without extended justification. Japanese parents do not negotiate morning routines. They do not explain why shoes go on before leaving the house every single day. The routine itself becomes the answer. The structure becomes the parent. The first principle is called Amae, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in all of cross-cultural psychology. Amae, defined by psychiatrist Takeo Doi in his landmark study of Japanese psychology, refers to a deep, unconditional sense of belonging and emotional safety that a child feels within the family structure. It is not indulgence. It is not permissiveness. It is the psychological bedrock that makes discipline feel safe rather than threatening. In practice, this means that Japanese children are rarely disciplined through shame, fear, or isolation. Instead, the emotional connection is kept completely intact, and the behavior is corrected. The child never feels that love is conditional on performance. And because of that security, because Amae is fully established, the child does not resist structure. They lean into it. They find it comforting rather than controlling. The second principle is Saikatsu Shido, translated loosely as life guidance. In Japanese schools and homes alike, this refers to the deliberate, daily practice of embedding behavioral values into the smallest routines of life. Children clean their own classrooms. They serve each other's lunch. They are responsible for the care of shared spaces from the age of 6. Not because they are being punished, Not because an adult is standing over them, but because the routine itself has been repeated so consistently that it has become identity. This is the science of habit architecture applied at a civilizational scale, and it is something Western parenting systems almost never implement with this level of intentionality. Before we go further, does any of this remind you of how you were raised? Or perhaps the opposite of how you were raised? Drop a comment below. The responses to questions like this one are always the most fascinating part of this community. Here is the part of this conversation that most parenting content will never say out loud. The reason Japanese discipline produces calmer, more self-directed children is not because Japanese parents are stricter. In many observable ways, they are softer in their daily interactions than their Western counterparts. They raise their voices less. They threaten less. They punish less. The uncomfortable truth is this: Western parenting is often louder precisely because it is less structured. When the architecture is missing, the voice fills the gap. And children, who are exquisitely sensitive to emotional authenticity, know the difference between a calm system and a stress performance. You cannot shout a child into self-discipline. You can only build an environment so consistent, so emotionally safe, and so quietly repetitive that self-discipline becomes the only logical response to it. So what does this actually look like in a Western home starting tomorrow morning? It begins with what Japanese child psychologists call the silent morning contract. You choose only three non-negotiable morning behaviors. Perhaps it is making the bed, placing dishes in the sink, and putting on shoes before leaving. You do not explain these every morning. You do not reward them. You simply hold them with complete calm consistency for 21 consecutive days. No drama when they are missed. A quiet, warm correction, and then you move forward. The Amae piece, the emotional safety, is built in the evenings. 10 minutes of completely undivided, child-led connection time where no correction happens. No phones. No improvement agenda. Just presence. This is what fills the psychological reservoir that makes daytime structure feel safe rather than punitive. These are not complicated interventions. They are extraordinarily simple. But simple, consistently held is the entire secret. The Japanese did not accidentally produce one of the most self-disciplined, community-minded, and emotionally regulated cultures in the documented world. They built it deliberately, quietly, and one repeated morning routine at a time. And the most remarkable thing is that none of it required more stress. It required less. It required the courage to be consistent instead of loud, and connected instead of controlling. If this gave you something genuinely worth thinking about, share it with a parent who needs to hear it today. And if you want to keep exploring how the world's most fascinating cultures are quietly solving the problems Western systems have been struggling with for decades, subscribe. There is a great deal more where this came from.